All right, everybody, welcome back to the Bitcoin Plus Plus live news desk. Joining me now is fellow Bitcoiner and pleb. I'd say a pleb. Gotten to know each other here, and Jesse Posner.
Posner.
I got it correct. And Jesse is working on something that sounds super interesting. Just the name alone, I think, is awesome. It's called Frosty Brews. And I believe you haven't done your presentation yet, but you're going to. Can you talk to us in simple terms? What is Frosty Brews?
Yeah, well, let's start with just kind of an explanation of something called FROST.
Yes.
So
Thank you.
FROST is an acronym for Flexible Round Optimized Schnorr Threshold Signatures.
Bless
And the idea is, how we typically do multi-sig in Bitcoin is we use Bitcoin scripts. And a few disadvantages of this is that when you go to redeem your multi-sig script, you reveal to the world your setup. So you reveal how many public keys you're using, and you reveal the threshold. So let's say you had like a 2 of 3. When you go to spend, the redeem script will contain the 3 public keys and the threshold 2.
So it will be known,
It
like
will
what
be
your
known.
surface of attack is.
Exactly.
Okay.
And if you have an unusual setup, that could kind of fingerprint you. Because if you're one of the only people that uses like a 3 of 38 or something, then every time somebody sees that on the chain or chain analysis sees it, they know it's probably you. And also, the more keys you use, the larger the script, and spending can get quite expensive as the size of this script increases. So an alternative method to implement multi-signatures in Bitcoin, now that we have Schnorr signatures with Taproot, is to actually do the whole multi-sig setup and signing completely off-chain.
Yeah.
And so what that means is on-chain, you'll see a single key and a single signature, but behind the scenes, it's actually a multi-sig.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So it uses a combination of
privacy tool.
Yeah, it's a privacy tool, and it also
right.
means your fees are going to stay low.
That's right.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
So that's Frost.
I kind of like this.
And there's a Frost BIP in the works. There's some implementations in review, and that's been worked on for a few years. But what's coming next is these additional protocols that we can add on to Frost to make it even more useful. And that's where the Frosty Brews comes into play.
Let's talk about these drinks.
Yeah,
It's so funny that you called it this. I'm sorry, I love the naming. Sometimes that's all it takes, right? But I'm sorry, continue.
Good name goes a long way.
It does.
So let's say, for example, we wanted to, let's say we have a 2 of 3.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody, one of these like components, like let's say, for example, I work on the BitKey team at Block, and we have a 2 of 3 wallet. And there's a key on your phone, a key in our server, and a key in a dedicated hardware device. And if you lose your phone and you get a new phone, you have to sweep all your Bitcoin to a fresh set of keys because we're using
because you've lost one now. Yes. Yeah.
Now, if we're using Frost, we can run a protocol where the hardware wallet and the server could send data to the phone, and the phone can recompute its lost share of the key.
That sounds like fault tolerance.
Yes.
That is pretty cool.
So in Frost, any threshold of participants can recover a share for any other participant. The other thing, so that's the first brew, is the repair protocol.
It's good brew.
The next one you have is a refresh protocol, which is now this share has been lost, and you have to assume it might have been compromised, because if somebody got a hold of that lost phone, maybe they can extract the share. So the next thing you want to do is you actually want to update these shares so all the shares change.
Okay.
And because
to match the new data.
Where you basically you have these shares of a private key.
Okay.
So in a 2 of 3, you have 3 participants, each have a share of a private key.
Yeah.
And so there's a way to change the shares without the private key changing. Yeah, so if somebody gets the lost one, if you've refreshed the shares, the lost one is no longer useful. It
Yeah,
can't be
it's
used for
invalid
anything.
now.
It's invalid.
Okay.
Or if you have a mobile adversary where you have an attacker who gets into one of the devices and then a week later gets into the next device, if you've rotated the shares in the interim, the first one is now invalid. So you can make it really you now have to force an attacker to get into a threshold of devices within a time period.
Wow.
And if they're not within that time period, then they have to start over again.
Interesting.
So that's something called proactive secret sharing refresh protocols that goes back to the 90s literature that was developed, or protocols that were developed in literature for Shamir secret sharing, and those can be applied to Frost. So we have a repair protocol, we have a refresh protocol. We also have a protocol where, let's say you want to add a new participant. So you have a 2 of 3, and now you want to add a second phone. So it's going to become a 2 of 4.
Yeah.
We can do that as well, off chain, without requiring a sweep, without changing the private key. We can add a new participant. We can also remove a participant. So we could go from a 2 of 4 back down to a 2 of 3. So we have this dynamic membership quality where we can add and remove participants off chain, no sweep, no transaction fee. And in addition, we could move the threshold around. So we can go from a 2 of 3 to a 3 of 5. We can go from a 3 of 5 to, a 4 of 6. We can change the whole configuration and completely do that without going on chain. And without this, it could get quite expensive to make these changes, because otherwise you have to do a sweep transaction. You have to pull in all your UTXOs into a single transaction.
Yeah.
Lots of inputs, expensive transaction. It's bad for privacy because now all your UTXOs are linked into a single transaction.
Yep.
So we want to stay off chain to do these changes. We don't want to go on chain. And that's what we can do with Frosty Brews.
I'm like totally impressed for real, because it just sounds like, because to me, one of the things, right, that kind of, I think, freaks people out is the fact that Bitcoin, like, we as Bitcoiners, we're like, yeah, transaction finality, but also transaction finality. Like it's a double-edged sword, right? We love it and we are also scared of it. And I feel like what you're working on is making it much more palatable. And it's like, okay, I can take a step in this direction now because there is some fault tolerance.
Yes.
And I really appreciate that. So let me ask you this, I guess, and I may be ahead of myself, but is Frosty Brews out in the wild yet, or is it not out in the wild yet? I mean, I believe Frost already is, but your piece of it.
Yeah, so there's
Maybe I'm misunderstanding.
There's a Frost implementation in a repo called SecP Fun that's merged. There's Zcash has a Frost implementation for that is merged in their repo, but they have a PR open to add Taproot support that will make it compatible with Bitcoin. And I have a PR open in the SecP 256K1-CKP repo that has a Frost implementation that's built on the SecP C library. PR is open and in review, and probably will get that merged this year.
Okay.
So that's the base Frost protocol. And these Frosty Brews, that's something new that people are just starting to think about. And so they're not implemented in these other repos. Zcash has an implementation of the repair protocol, but not the other ones. I have a Python implementation of Frost with all these brews implemented. Now, it hasn't been reviewed, so I wouldn't use it for like production cases, but for prototyping and for experimenting, all this stuff is ready to be played with in my Python repo, which is called Frost BIP 340. You can find on my GitHub, Jesse Posner. So that's ready to be experimented with, and we're going to have production quality code coming that implements all of these extra brews.
This is very cool. Jesse, I really appreciate you sitting down with us, explaining this. This is absolutely fantastic. I'm really, I think your presentation tomorrow is going to be really awesome. Thank you so
My
much for
pleasure.
talking to us about Frost and the Frosty Brews. It's good to have you on.
Thank you.
All right, guys, back to the main stage. Take it easy.